Per 7 anni io ho svolto l'attività di allevatore e allenatore. E ho vissuto sui campi di corsa e nelle scuderie di cavalli da corsa per 7 anni, come ti dicevo, ed è un'attività molto importante, molto interessante e soprattutto che ti fa fare un'esperienza capitale proprio per la tua vita.
Era una malattia di famiglia, nel senso che già i suoi antenati, i suoi nonni, erano tra i fondatori del Jockey Club italiano. Cavalli purosangue nascono tutti, si dice, da 7 stalloni base e da 30 fattrici purosangue. Ecco, lo zio credo che la sua peculiarità principale fosse di essere uno dei pochi che allora, negli anni 30 in Italia, studiasse sui libri internazionali gli incroci migliori per produrre nella maniera migliore cavalli da corsa. Una delle ultime fattrici possedute da Luchino, che si chiamava Talbot, e da questa fattrice venne una femmina basilare per l'allevamento italiano che si chiamava Talma, che produsse poi 2 vincitori di derby. Si trovano ancora sulle piste italiane cavalli che vincono gran premi e che vengono dalle fattrici comprate negli anni 30 da Luchino Visconti.
Throughout his 20s, Visconti was not just one of the youngest trainers and breeders in Italian racing history, but also one of its most successful. During his racing career, Visconti was a frequent visitor to Paris, where he was introduced to Coco Chanel, the queen of Parisian fashion. Her connections in artistic circles helped him to enter a world which was socially glamorous and intellectually avant-garde. In 1936, he decided to give up his stables in Milan and take an unpaid job as an assistant to the great French director Jean Renoir.
Belle invention, les scarponnettes. Notre nigo, tu vois tout, tu vois rien du tout. Oh, bah c'est parce qu'elle est debout. Si elle pouvait s'asseoir, le paysage deviendrait beaucoup plus intéressant.
Visconti's duties included organizing the costumes during the filming.
Dans la partie de campagne, il y a peut-être une chose qui peut vous amuser, c'est que j'ai eu des assistants qui, depuis, ont fait parler d'eux. J'ai eu Visconti, qui m'a bien aidé. J'ai eu Jacques Becker, évidemment, n'est-ce pas? J'ai eu Cartier-Bresson. Et j'ai eu... Enfin, ça s'est passé... Nous étions une bande d'amis, et ça s'est passé comme une espèce d'heureuses vacances au bord d'une très jolie rivière.
Altered Visconti's political perspective dramatically. Before leaving Italy, he had flirted with fascism, but Renoir and his circle were all dedicated communists, at a time when Europe was moving inexorably towards war.
This was really the beginning of the assertion of an independence of your own, wasn't it?
Probably, yes.
And it took place in Paris?
Yes, sure, because my meeting with Jean Renoir was very important for me, because I came from a country where there was the fascism, you know, in this moment. You remember that, no?
Yes, indeed.
And then I went in Paris and I met Renoir and all the entourage of Jean Renoir. It was all young communists. And finally in my life I began to talk with friends and to understand something that I never understood before.
This was a very Marxist community, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And from that began all my work.
Visconti became a lifelong communist, but despite his opposition to Mussolini's fascists, he went back to Italy in 1939, on the eve of World War II. A few months after his return, his mother died and was buried in the Erba family mausoleum in Milan. Visconti inherited a large part of her share of the family business. Whilst his eldest brother Guido was fighting for Mussolini's army in North Africa, Visconti was determined to try his own hand as a director. In 1942, at the height of the war, he found the money to make his first feature film. He described it as anti-fascist and gave it the powerful one-word title, Obsession. Ossessione described a social world that could not have been more different to the one that Visconti was brought up in. It was based on a recent American crime thriller called The Postman Always Rings Twice, 4 years before the Hollywood version of the same book.
Si mangia qui? Ti domando se si mangia qui. Guarda, io pago, eh?
Va bene, ma si mangia di là. Aspetta in sala che te lo porterò io.
I know that Ossessione, how can I say, deve molto
Owes a lot, yes.
to the French
And yet,
school.
to
But in the
Ossessione-
same time, because in Italy in this moment they was making just comedy, rose comedy, and in this moment to talk about a certain Italian reality, you know,
Yes.
popular reality, was like if you open a window in a room who is closed by 20 years.
In the film, the two lovers murder the woman's husband and are forced to flee for their lives. Even though the war itself is never mentioned, their desperation reflects the anxiety of the times. In October 1942, Mussolini's forces and their German allies were decisively defeated at the Battle of El Alamein. Amongst those killed was Visconti's brother Guido, just 6 months after he had inherited the title of Duke. The year before, their father had died peacefully at his beloved castle in Grazzano. Duke Giuseppe was an unswerving royalist. He was rumoured to have been both bisexual and the lover of the Queen of Italy, who appointed him chief courtier at her palace in Rome. After 3 deaths in quick succession, Visconti was now answerable to no one, and he was also spectacularly wealthy. When Mussolini was deposed in 1943, Italy was occupied by the Germans, and Rome was governed by the Nazis and their Italian collaborators. When Rome was in turn liberated by the Allies, a series of show trials were organized which unleashed a wave of bloodletting and revenge amongst the Roman population. Visconti was one of the directors hired to film the trials for a documentary financed by the Italian Communist Party called Days of Glory. Visconti had spent most of the war in the villa his father had left him in Rome. He took part in the resistance by hiding arms in his garden, and he harbored leading communists by disguising them as members of his household staff. In 1944, he himself was imprisoned and interrogated by the authorities. At the time of his arrest, he was in disguise, but the initials LV embroidered on his shirt gave his identity away. During the occupation, the house was requisitioned by the Germans. Visconti later evoked this period in his masterpiece The Damned. For Days of Glory, Visconti filmed in the courtroom where the show trials took place, Many of his comrades in the resistance had been tortured and killed by the very men he now turned his cameras on. Visconti himself was called as a witness in the trial of the most notorious defendants: Caruso, the head of the fascist police, and Koch, the suave head of security, who had arrested him and conducted his interrogation. When he was asked whether he would support death sentences for the accused, Visconti said yes. When the war was over, Visconti once again put his cinema at the service of his political ideals with a film that began as a documentary called La Terra Trema.
For the Terra Trema, that was my second movie. I had some money for the Communist Party, and I went in Sicily like this, with the idea to do just a documentario, you know, on the life of the Sicilian fishermen. And this was the beginning, in the sense that we begin to look at the reality of our country. But I was convinced to be very objectivo. I was not, because you can never be completely objectivo in arte. You know, you are always yourself.
Visconti quickly abandoned the idea of making a documentary and got the fishermen to act out their own story. It's a method which has been imitated many times since.
There are no actors, you know. This is the great experience I make. I know that to be herself, to be sincerely herself, it's very easy. You know, it's when you begin to construct it begins to be difficult. Some stories need real actors. Then I like great actors, very great. If they are not great, I prefer to take people that is exactly what I want, you know, and they correspond exactly to what I think, but they are not actors.
Oh, questo sono io. Questo sicuramente sono io. Gli stivali, la giacca, questa è una cosa di tela, mi ricordo, questa roba non ce l'ho più, perché mi ricorda, beh, lei che mi assomigliavo tanto comunque, questi vestiti, cappello bianco, questo ce l'avevo io, originale queste, non è per andare a pescare, questa è proprio tutta roba mia. Un padre, cioè i pantaloni non si capiva quale era il suo, tutti pieni di cose. E mi ricordo che la madre me le devo cucire, perché allora non c'era tanta da fare. Il programma lo facevano giorno per giorno, noi restavamo lì, in esposizione, sapevo quello che voleva, non c'era via di mezzo, stabiliva quella cosa e basta. Poi sa, Visconti, basta dire una parola, era come Hitler, che ne so, era sentito, non è?
Questi sono dei disegnini che io facevo rapidamente per rappresentare gli attori, i personaggi che erano nell'inquadratura, per i raccordi, per la continuità. Questa è la scena quando rammendano le reti e parlano tra di loro i pescatori, fanno le considerazioni sulle loro condizioni di lavoro e cominciano a pensare di potersi ribellare ai padroni delle barche. Finito di girare una scena andavano a casa per mangiare, per dormire, ma non capivano che cosa fosse un raccordo, cioè la necessità, se avevano girato una scena con la barba, la necessità che dovevano mantenersi la barba per la continuità. E io mi trovavo davanti della gente che improvvisamente non aveva più la barba.
Franco Rosi, one day, we done our best job during Terra Trema, and one day they didn't unload the fish in proper way, proper place, and the camera was somewhere else, and so he stopped the whole thing, and he attacked us, the two of us, come here, and you think you can go ahead in this kind of profession where it's required attention, intelligence, talent, you are this and that. It's heaviest names you can think of. Franco Rosi was absolutely shattered. He said, I cannot go like this, be insulted like that in front of those fishermen. I have no more authority with them and all of this. I wanted to go back to Naples. And I spent the night to convince him that one day you'll do like him. Because when we are like a general on a trench, you know, on the front line, you don't spare words. You just say what comes to your mouth. And I convinced him to stay, but Visconti was really shocking.
The constant problems of filming with non-professionals in an isolated and difficult location increased the cost of the film considerably.
Per un certo periodo di tempo ci sono stati i soldi, poi sono finiti i soldi e allora Visconti ha cominciato a finanziare in parte il film con i suoi mezzi personali. Ha venduto anche dei beni personali, di famiglia.
He sold a beautiful apartment house to finance La Terra Trema. He needed money, so he would take that, sold some jewels of his mother, or this apartment house, instead of selling it, find the right buyer and get the right price, he sold it for nothing, just to finance and finish the film. He sold it for 1/10 of the value. But he got the money, cash, to keep the production going. I love the idea that the real characters of this village of fishermen in Sicily were playing themselves, but themselves up to a certain point. If you had to have a priest, you wanted to have a real priest. If you had the role of a policeman, you took a policeman. It's fine when you have to play the policeman or play the priest. But if you ask that policeman to rape a girl of 16, then that man, you will not perform that. So, you see what I mean? Or the priest being bribed by a mafioso, a real priest will never do it. So you need an actor to perform the role. So it was something jarring all the time. The whole principle creaks when you must have reality. But you managed at the end to create a canvas, believable canvas, which was not reality, but was not at the same time was not funny. It was the real people, and it has a purity that no other film Visconti has.
Six months after they had arrived, Visconti and his crew finally left the village of Acitrezza. La Terra Trema was quickly recognized as one of the masterpieces of Italian cinema, and it established Visconti as a director of vision and authority.
Io contemporaneamente sono partito per Roma con lui e sono andato, ho ospitato lui a casa sua, stavo.
Come mai è partito con lei?
Boh, non so, spero che sono stato simpatico, non lo so perché. Di tutti quanti ha scelto me.
It was a kind of mascot, lucky charm for the crew. And then at the end, like the dogs, some of the crew were kept with them for 6 months, and then they couldn't leave them behind and brought them at home. And so Visconti did the same with Ignazio. And he taught him these strict rules of a good butler, and the boy has been butler with him 20 years.
In primo tempo chiamava Visconti quando giravamo in Sicilia, poi a casa sua lo chiamava Conte. Lui a casa sua manteneva, c'erano 5-6 persone di servizio e lui era una persona sola, insomma. C'era il cuoco, la guardarobiera, quelli che facevano le pulizie, la casa è grandissima. Mi piaceva che il giardino fosse in ordine, quei fiori e tutto, la genderia fosse lucida, cose così, insomma, perché tutto a gusto suo. Tutto al gusto di Visconti, non doveva fare, lo diceva lui, questo qui, questo là, i fiori, quello che voleva, sì, c'erano i fiori, tutto. Abbiamo fatto dei regali grandi, arrivata la notte fino a una macchina. Oggi macchina non niente, ma allora nel 60 una macchina era un valore, non tutti ce l'avevano.
Franco Zeffirelli was Visconti's main assistant in both the cinema and the theatre. He had also been his lover since they met in 1946, and he too lived in the villa in Rome.
I remember when I went to live with him, the ritual of a fork and knife and fork and knife and fork and knife and glass and glass and glass and glass, and white wine with fish and red wine with other, and liqueur at the end, and coffee in a certain way, and just, well, there were the counts of Milano, you know, brought up in the most extraordinary, exquisite. They had nannies, they had teachers, they had access to everything.
Di quella fila l'orrendo fuoco, tutte le fibre marde a banco.
In his first colour film, Visconti returned to the world of his own class and to his first love, the opera.
Most film directors haven't a clue about opera and have never done it. But he did. He was in love with it. He adored theater and opera and film. And he brought a theatricality to the films. That had a great deal to do with his not being afraid to be extravagant in a film. You know, the emotions or the settings or whatever.
Basta! È troppo tardi, è finito! Io non sono il tuo romantico eroe. E non ti amo più. Volevo dei soldi, li ho avuti, basta.
Visconti really took his time as opposed to Hollywood, because that's always, you know, hurry up and get it done as fast as you can. It's costing money. He would have fresh flowers every day in all the big rooms, no matter whether, you know, he was going to shoot there or not. And on Friday nights, the men from Lux Films would come up, and these little men in the black suits, you know, and they were talking to him, bothering him, and he got mad. And way at the end of this hallway was a table and a bunch of flowers, and he walked down the hallway where we were to this table, picked up the flowers, threw them on the floor and stamped on them and said, "Mad, mad, 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 you know, you're driving me crazy, leave me alone, go away." And they just ran. They just practically ran out of the place. He was outrageous in that respect. He really was.
Vai, vai, signora! Vai, vai, squadrina! Vai, vai via, rompiti il collo, non fermarti!
He liked very much to have an opportunity of shouting and bam, breaking things, throwing china against the walls, breaking mirrors. Luchino was always looking for the moment where he could unload, open up this furnace passion that he had within him, and as he was an outrageously powerful personality, is opening up the hearts where, like a volcano exploding. There was no moderation. It was not subtle. He lingered over the moments where passion was coming out.
Visconti directed operas and plays throughout his career in the cinema. When he first worked with Maria Callas, she was famous for her extraordinary voice, but he transformed her into one of the most powerful stage performers of all time.
First of all, I must say about Luchino, he is a gentleman. I was thoroughly spoiled by him before we even started working together, because he was the Grand Seigneur was treating the prima donna so lavishly, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't know whether I'm really always on that pedestal for him or for others, but I felt it in his work with me. He taught me something without his knowing it, that the less I move without evident reason or profound reason, the more it is my own personality. Did me enormous good, of course.
Visconti revolutionized an art form that had become stiff and moribund by making it dramatic and psychologically convincing.
You know, opera can be easily ridiculous, no matter how good the director is. The way of expression is very old-fashioned, so it's very, very difficult to handle.
Of course, many people will find it absolutely astonishing that you, who have been so concerned with the truth of the cinema and with exquisite acting on the stage, can take so much of what is called Hamish acting in the
Not
opera.
Hamish acting. Why you say that?
No, I mean, this is the normal opinion
Yes.
of opera.
The very worst opinion is if an opera is well directed and well produced and with good singer, I don't think that there can be another genre of artistico.
Visconti is still renowned as Italy's greatest ever director of opera.
He threw me out practically after 5 years. And I was so precious for him because I was the assistant director in cinema, in theater, I was decorating, I was answering the phones, I was paying the bills, I was walking the dogs, I was doing everything. Out of my life. Yeah, take your dogs, go. Never violent, physically bad, my God, that tongue.
I was told that, you know, he was a communist. Luchino, who was a billionaire, you know, and royalty, was also a communist, which I don't know how it all worked with them, but it did. There was a celebration for some day of the Communist Party, I don't know what it was, and there was this man walking around on the set. And Franco Zeffirelli came to me and said, if Luchino wants to have you take a picture with him and that man, don't do it, because he's the head of the Communist Party here. And I just thought he was some weird man, weird guy. I didn't know who he was. I think that's one of the reasons that the film was never released in the United States, because that was time of the witch hunts, McCarthyism, all that terrible stuff that went on here. I was terribly upset because I thought that the film was gorgeous and beautiful and fascinating, and I thought I was very good in it, and I was upset that it wasn't shown.
In the 1950s, Italian politics were dominated by conservative Catholic forces on the right and a powerful Communist Party on the left. Visconti was a personal friend of Palmiro Togliatti, the head of the Italian Communist Party, and he was an unequivocal supporter of the left. Italy itself was characterized by a startling divide between the rich industrial north of the country and the backward agricultural south. Visconti decided to focus on this issue in his next film.
È una storia alla quale tengo molto perché è un soggetto mio, è un vecchio sogno che io avevo, quello di realizzare un film a Milano, che è la mia città, ed è secondo me un problema, uno di quei problemi sociali importantissimi italiani, cioè il rapporto tra nord e sud in Italia, cioè la convivenza di gente del sud o di gente del nord al sud o di gente del sud al nord. In questo caso è una famiglia di meridionali, di lucani, che va a vivere a Milano, cioè che va a cercare a Milano la possibilità di miglioramento della vita, di progresso, eccetera, eccetera.
Rocco and his brothers is about 5 brothers from a poor southern family who travel to Milan to seek their fortunes.
Hop, ancora, ancora, hop, 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 hop.
The film tells the story of the different fates that befall them in this harsh new urban environment.
Hop, giri, giri, hop, hop.
2 of the brothers, Simone and Rocco, become professional boxers and fall out over their love for the same girl. The film made stars of Alain Delon and Annie Girardot.
Intanto cercami perdono.
Ma perché, Simone?
Vigliacco, sei un vigliacco.
Fatti difendere dalle donne.
Schifoso.
Cercami perdono. Cercami perdono, t'ho detto.
Rocco, vieni via.
Rocco.
Non lo vedi che è ubriaco?
Rocco, cercami perdono. Lascia stare! Cosa vuoi fare, Simone? Quello che mi pare piano. Io! No! Portare corno per lui! Vieni! Vieni qui! No! Può venire con me la buonata! Può venire con me che ti fa la buona! Simone, no! Simone! Non lo fa!
Rocco, aiutami! Rocco, aiuto!
Simone!
Simone!
No!
Simone!
No! Fermati, Simone! No!
Rocco! Rocco, aiuto, no, Simone!
Simone!
Il la viole devant Rocco. Et après toute la bagarre, ça a duré 8 jours, enfin 8 nuits. Rien que la bagarre, rien que déjà le viol. Et après les poursuites, à chaque fois, ils se tapent dessus dans tout Milan. Et que c'est dans toute cette ville comme ça. Et ils se tapent partout, ils vont pour se tuer, on sait jamais, ils n'en peuvent plus. Ça a duré des nuits entières, le tournage.
You have always been interested in violence. I'd like the reason for this.
The violence here in Rocco is in a certain way the consequence of a very strict, legame of family, you know?
Family ties.
And a special family of the south of Italy.
But also under it there is a peasant innocence that is violated by the modern society.
Absolutely.
You feel that it's more the responsibility of the
both. Always in life.
The setting of Visconti's next film couldn't have been more different on the surface. But once again, he focused on the division between North and South, this time during the struggle for the unification of Italy a century before. It was based on a novel by Giuseppe di Lampedusa about a Sicilian nobleman facing enormous political change. Although he himself was from the north, Visconti understood the novel from the inside.
Ho fatto importanti scoperte politiche. Sapete che succede nel nostro paese? Niente succede, niente. Solo un'inavvertibile sostituzione di ceti. Il ceto medio non vuole distruggerci, ma vuole solo prendere il nostro posto, con le maniere più dolci, mettendoci magari in tasca qualche migliaio di ducati. E poi tutto può restare com'è. Capite, padre? Il nostro è il paese degli accomodamenti.
After the huge commercial success of Rocco and his brothers, Visconti was able to attract international finance and to cast one of America's biggest stars, Burt Lancaster, in the title role. Alain Delon was by now one of Europe's most popular screen idols. He played the other leading role in a film which was every bit as epic as a Hollywood blockbuster. Claudia Cardinale played the young bourgeois heiress Angelica.
Everything was real. The flowers, the lighting, the chandelier, everything. Because, I mean, even what I had in my little bag was real, authentic. The perfume, the handkerchief, the carnet de bal. Because with Luchino everything has to be very precise.
Adesso stiamo andando verso una stanza, mi pare, se mi ricordo bene, dove si girò la sala da bagno del principe. La vasca da bagno fu piazzata da queste parti, mi pare, e l'ingresso della stanza era quello.
Che cosa c'è?
Sono mia eccellenza. Padre Pirrone. Eccellenza permessa. Oh, chiedo scusa, eccellenza, non sapevo.
Oh, non fate lo sciocco, padre.
Sì, eccellenza.
Siete abituati alla nudità degli animi, quella del corpo è molto più innocente. Datemi l'accappatoio piuttosto.
Come?
L'accappatoio?
Ah, sì, subito, eccellenza.
Quando ho occasione di vedere il Gattopardo, soprattutto la scena del bagno, e nelle occasioni appunto che mi erano familiari perché vissute nei momenti di lavoro, vedo Luchino nei gesti, nei movimenti di come si muove Burt Lancaster dopo il bagno, l'accappatoio, come si dà il profumo, erano proprio i gesti di Luchino.
Vous êtes un peu pour nous qui voyons de l'extérieur un monarque qui s'installe dans son royaume. Il paraît que vous vivez dans un merveilleux palais, vous ne travaillez que dans l'authentique. Vous êtes un peu un grand seigneur émigré dans le domaine populaire du cinéma. Dans le Guépard, il y a un moment une phrase qui est significative.
Est-ce que je peux rectifier ce que vous avez dit? Oui. Je ne vis pas dans un fastueux palais, je vis dans une maison assez simple à Rome. Et j'ai fait ce film avec un certain faste parce que le film le voulait. Alors chaque film et chaque histoire a besoin d'une ambiance qui est son ambiance.
Visconti brought to life a world he had known since childhood, which was governed by its own strict codes of behavior and suffocated by ritual.
È una grande emozione per me ritornare in questo luogo dove abbiamo fatto moltissime scene del film.
in questa grande sala abbiamo girato la scena del pranzo dopo l'arrivo a Donnafugata per le vacanze della famiglia del Gattopardo. Non è riconoscibile in queste condizioni, però il tavolo, c'era un grande tavolo, qui c'era il Gattopardo, qui c'era i due ragazzi giovani, Angelica e Delon.
Che cosa è successo?
Ora glielo dico.
Angelica is a tough woman. She looks like a poor little girl in the country. She's not like this. And if you remember the scene, scandal at the dinner, and he's telling a story, Tancredi, quite strong, she laughs like crazy, and all the people looks at her. Big scandal. You don't laugh like this. But she was a very popular woman, natural. And she was using that very strongly. And Luchino wants that. He said, you have to laugh with the inside and loudly. You have to make a scandal. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. Everybody was looking at me. I couldn't stop.
È una marcia funebre, è assolutamente un momento funereo, è la fine di una società con tutti i vizi e le brutture che può avere una società di quel livello. È un film pessimista, lui dice che non ci saranno più i leoni e i gattopardi di un tempo, ma ci saranno le iene di oggi. È stata molto faticosa, perché, dico, la Sicilia nel cuore dell'estate è un momento difficile, ma era un momento vitale per lui, perché stava girando una storia che aveva scelto, ha tornato se stesso, questa sua famiglia professionale con la quale lui amava lavorare. Ha molti punti di identificazione con se stesso, poteva impedirgli di rimpiangere, dico, tutta la sua giovinezza, Milano, quello che aveva rappresentato lui Milano a quel momento della sua vita, Grazzano, tutto.
La Palme d'Or du Festival international du film 1963 a été attribuée à l'unanimité au film réalisé par M. Luchino Visconti, Le Guépard.
Questi sono gli applausi che hanno salutato Luchino Visconti, vincitore del 16° Festival di Cannes. Ecco Luchino Visconti che riceve il premio dalle mani di Jean Moreau. Come sentite, questa è stata veramente una vittoria incontrastata di Luchino Visconti. Il cinema italiano è vittorioso da questo 16° Festival del cinema.
Visconti's newfound fame as a director made him an international celebrity. In the 1960s, he directed plays and operas all over Europe and toyed with a number of short films in the satirical mood of the times. In 1966, he directed an episode for a Dino De Laurentiis picture called The Witches, on location in Kitzbühel in Austria.
Via! Via! Hey! Answer the door! Ah! Grusco! Grusco! Come on, sweetie, fill it up. Dino! Come, Dino! Hurry up and get the bag.
He had recently begun an affair with a young Austrian student called Helmut Berger, whose family ran a local hotel. Helmut had no acting experience, but Visconti decided to give him a small speaking part in the film.
Signora, what is it? A helicopter just landed on the hill outside the house.
It did? I'll never get rid of him.
Visconti moved Helmut, who was 40 years his junior and spoke almost no Italian, into his house in Rome, and they began a relationship which was to be the longest in Visconti's life.
I didn't want to work with him because being Luchino Visconti, all the boys were after him to make a move with him, like Delon and it's a long list. And so I said, no, I don't want to work with you. But he insisted, and it happened. I was staying in Via Salaria in his house. I loved it. It was like a Parthenon palace. He had a cook, and he haven't seen him for 2 years. In front of his dressing room there was a table, and there was the menu for the next day, written from the cook, and then he corrected it. And if the food wasn't okay, he wrote, please don't try again, try something else. And he also wrote the wine he wants, and we had 8 servants, and the servants were not allowed to speak. Then you go to the sitting room, everything with a bell, and then I had to go. And then he had his 10 dogs, and only one was allowed to come in the house. It was an Afghan, black one. It was called Rocco. I couldn't stand him because it reminded me of Rocco and his brothers, of Alain Delon.
Visconti was now in his 60s himself, and his work defied categorization. He remained aloof from the popular avant-garde, and despite his left-wing political views, he refused to attach himself to any particular movement.
Se io aprissi le orecchie alle voci di un movimento giovanile, parliamo pure nell'ambito del cinematografo, le richiuderei immediatamente. Io guardo ai giovani e spero che dai giovani possa venire qualche suggerimento, qualche impulso, qualche nuova forza, ma per il momento purtroppo sono molto deluso e preferisco continuare con le mie forze e preferisco chiudermi, fare delle esperienze mie personali, per questo non vuol dire che io sia un cadavere.
In 1968, Visconti stepped into the very epicenter of 60s controversy with a film which could never have been made before, and which broke one of the century's greatest taboos, by showing Nazism as not just evil, but also decadent, narcissistic and erotic.
Wir haben die Knechtschaft gebrochen, für uns war's ein großer Sieg. Wir werden weiter marschieren, wenn alles in Scherben fällt. Denn heute gehört uns Deutschland und morgen die ganze Welt. Wir werden weiter marschieren.
Aveva questo lato torbido, dico, che c'era anche nel nazismo. There was a kind of admiration, you know, for the force, the sort of labyrinthic, shading element which is in violence. There was also a physical attraction, you know, to the German kind of race. There was also that element.
The danger that you feel in this film is enormous. You really are drowned in danger and darkness. The film fundamentally is about the eternal power of evil in its many, many different forms. And evil is one of the most fascinating things. That people are eternally just want to keep plunging into it, so long as they hope that they actually don't become like those people. But, you know, if we can be voyeurs and observers into it, Visconti gave us an extraordinary chance.
Helmut was the very specimen of German, pretty blonde boy. And even, you know, his character, you know, he had something hard. Visconti had a sort of masochistic feeling, you know. Somebody who had been very sort of mild and sweet would not interest him.
Martin! No!
Oh, was rather not that complicated, but it was very particular of Visconti. And Helmut Berger, you know, was that. He was unpleasant, you know, he was sometimes, could be sort of insulting, you know, but again, you know, it's a matter of one of those situations which is one has the power and has the money, the other one has beauty and youth, and so it's a big struggle.
I chose Helmut Berger because I thought that he had the possibility to do this kind of character, you know, who is a very special character, and I don't make a fault, I think, because he goes very well in the film, and for he was a very, very important experience, you know, because before this he makes just one little film here in Italy, and another very little role in a sketch that I made 2 years ago. But I was sure that he had the possibility and the quality to do this role.
Frühling kommt, der Sperling biebt, Duft aus Blütenkelchen. Bin in einen Mann verliebt, unweiss nicht in welchen. Ob er Geld hat, ist mir gleich, denn mich macht die Liebe reich. Kinder, heute Abend, da such ich mir was aus. Einen Mann, einen richtigen Mann.
With me, he was very tough. With all the other actors, he had always respect and explained them, and he had more patience. With me, he was always shouting in front of all the other actors, which I really didn't like. You could have said to me privately. Visconti was very bossy. In work, in love, in sex, in domination, and everything had to go his way. And he didn't listen to anybody. Because he knew what he does is the right thing. And it was. He didn't make a mistake with me, did he?
Master and pupil. Helmut was there to learn everything. He didn't know anything. He'd never made a film before. He had no culture. He had no style, as Visconti said. He was just a skiing waiter with a big bum. That's how he picked him up on the ski slopes. That was the story, anyway. And so he was going to be transformed. And that's what Visconti did. And